Hello. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can build a QR code generator desktop app using Python with customTKinter and TKinter. The aim of this app is to allow the user to enter some text, be that a web URL or just some text in general, customize the size and the color of the QR code, preview it, and then save the QR code as a PNG image to wherever they want on their desktop. If you like the video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. Okay, before I actually get into the code, I'd like to show you a short demo of what the app looks like and how it will be used. So we've got the app here, and we've got a sidebar on the left, and then we've got where the image would be, which would be the QR code. To begin with, it just has a placeholder image. So we can put our text, we can select the version, the box size, and the border size. All of these determine basically how big the actual image is going to be. And then we can change the foreground color, and we can change the background color. So I'm just going to have a quick play and do a quick demo. So let's put test down. Let's go for full size 12, 12, border size 12. Color of, let's go green, background color, let's go black. And then we just hit preview. There we go. We can adjust the border size if we want to get rid of more of the empty space around the edges. Maybe make it just a little bit smaller. That'll do. And then if you hit save, ask you where I want to save it. So I'm just going to call it 1. So that's saved to my desktop. Just open it up. And there's the QR code. So with that done, let's crack on with. Before I go any further, if you'd like a copy of the source code for this app, there is a link in the description to it on GitHub. First, we need to install tkinter, as it may or may not be installed with Python. This will vary based on which operating system you use and how you install Python. For myself, I use a Mac, and I used Homebrew to install Python. Now, as part of that, tkinter is not actually installed with Python, so I have to install it separately. And to do that, I use the brew command. I'm going to specify 3.12 because that's the version of Python I'm using. I already had it installed, otherwise it would just go through the installer. If you're using Windows, tkinter is usually installed as part of the actual Python installer you can download from python.org. Next, I'm going to create a new virtual environment called venv. And I'm going to activate it. And now I'm just going to install the required packages for the app. That's that done. I'll quickly go over some of these. So CTK color picker, that's just the color wheel that you saw in the demo for the foreground and background. customTKinter, that's going to be what we use to build the GUI elements. Pillow, that's used for image rendering. And lastly, QR code is, well, that's for making a QR code. The other packages in there, like dart detect and packaging, they're just additional packages that are dependency for one of the others. With all that done, I'll make a requirements.txt file to allow for the packages to be easily installed, and then we can move on to actually making the app. And there we go. Okay, let's begin by creating some folders. So the first one I want to create is images, then another one called modules, and then I need some subfolders in there. The first one being elements, another one called image_check, and lastly QR code. So in the images folder, I'm just going to drop in 2 images. Pretty self-explanatory. So got one called icon, which will just be the icon for the app. And then the other one, which is placeholder, is just the default image that shows up when we haven't generated a QR code when the app starts up. In the elements folder, I'm just going to create a bunch of files. I'll go over what each one does as we go along, but in short, each file will just basically be a component that makes up part of the actual app itself. So, for example, the first file I'm going to create is called slider. That'll just be the code for the slider. And it's reusable, so we can use it multiple times instead of just one for this slider, one for that slider. That wasn't the aim for this. We're just going to create one function that creates a slider with a set of parameters, and then it just goes back to the app. Next will be text_entry, then color picker, and lastly, __init__.py. So I'm just going to close all those because I just want to get all these files created first, and then we'll go over what we do with each one of them. Image check. There is a file called image underscore check. And then lastly, there's one file called QR underscore code in the QR code folder. Now I had to put the underscore in between QR and code because if I just use QR code, it interferes with the QR package. So I had to name it differently. And lastly, underscore init. Okay, so whilst I'm here, I may as well do this one first. I was going to go back up to elements, but I may as well do this. Close all those. Let's just paste the code in for this. This one's actually pretty straightforward. So just to go over what this particular function does, it's pretty self-explanatory. It generates the QR code. It'll just take a number of arguments. So what the data is, the version, the box. There is some default values for some of these as well. Not pretty much most of them except for the actual data because we want the user to specify something. So that's pretty self-explanatory as to what goes through. And then further down we have effectively setting the size of the QR code and the version of it. Add the data to the QR code, and then we're going to build the QR code. We're going to make an image from the QR code that we've basically generated so far, and then we're just going to return the image back to whatever called it. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Save that. Next, I'll do image check. So what this function does is it just does a quick check to see if both the icon and the placeholder images are present. If they're not, then the app will crash, basically. So that's what we're doing here. We're just going to take an image as an argument. What the error message should be, that's something we'll take care of in the main.py function when we get around to it. It'll try to open the file. If it can't, it'll just throw an error, raise an exception, and then the app will crash. If it does work, it'll just return the image file. Save that. Okay, let's go and build the individual components for the app. So the first one I'm going to start with is, let's just do color picker. So this one isn't the most involved one because a lot of the actual build for this is actually done as part of the CTK color picker. So we're going to take a number of arguments. We're going to take a title, what the master is. If you've used tkinter before, then master is just what frame it relates to. We've got a title, we've got title row, title column. I'll not go through the rest of these, they're pretty straightforward, except for sticky. NSEW basically means north, south, east, west, just means align it center. Now, as we go down, we've got color picker title, so that'll just be a CTK label. Then we'll tell it where to put it on the grid. That'll just take a number of the arguments that we had before. Then we've got the color picker. So this is the element that we use to create the color wheel for the foreground and the background. And then what we want to do is create an empty dictionary called elements. And then we're going to add the color picker title and the color picker to that dictionary. And then we'll return it back to what called it. Now, each of these will be an object. So we need to unpack that later on, which again will be in main.py. So that's the color wheel. Next up, I'll do slider. So you might end up seeing some similar structure to this as you just saw on the color picker, but there's a little bit more to this. So we've got a single function called create slider. Again, takes a number of arguments, pretty much the same as it was for the other one. There are a few additional ones because this one doesn't build frames by default, so we need to add that as well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to build slider title, tell it where to put in the grid, slider frame. So just to cover this, the title goes above the frame, so it's not actually kept within the actual frame. And then we build the frame. Then we've got an initial value for the slider that we're going to set. Then we're going to create the slider. Pretty straightforward. Then we're going to set the default value for it. Forget what I've set on this. I think it's like 10. Well, no, it would vary from each one. Then we're going to specify where on the grid it's going to be. Then we're going to put a label next to it, and this will basically just show us what the actual value of the slider is. And then again, we're going to create an elements dictionary, add those 4 elements in, and then return that back to whatever called it. Now, again, this is repeatable. So because we've got how many? I think it was 3 sliders on this. I can use this function 3 times. to create 3 sliders. I could add, if I wanted more sliders, yeah, I just repeat this function each time, and then I get a different slider back each time. And the last one is the text entry. So this is where you would put your URL or whatever text you want to go into your QR code. Now this code looks very much like the slider one because basically it's pretty much the same thing. So this function will basically give us our text field. We'll get a title. We'll get a new frame. We get a label which just says text, and that'll just sit to the left-hand side of the data entry field. And then we'll get an entry field to go and put our text into. And then lastly, we'll have another empty dictionary that adds these 4 elements to it and then just returns that back to whatever called it. So similar to the others, each one's a little different, but not too different. Okay, so with all that done, we just need to make the main.py file. So I'll just do that now. I'll just paste the code into that. Okay, before I go over this, I'm just going to reactivate the virtual environment because I had to restart it. Okay, so before I go any further, I'm just going to address these problems here. Can't find the imports. Oh, I know why. Okay, so the virtual environment's active still, so I need to change the interpreter to there, and gone. That's better. Okay, so let's go over the main function. So, got all our imports. I'm not going to go over those because they're pretty self-explanatory. We just need to import what we need to get the app working. So the first thing we're going to do in the main function is work out where the base directory is. So that's basically just what the full path of the main.py file is. Then we're going to do an icon check to make sure that the icon PNG file is in the right place. So if it can't find it, it'll just chuck up an error and then crash the app. And again, it'll do the same thing for the preview image as well. And then it's just going to go and take the preview image and then just make it a CTK image so we can use it within our application. Once that's done, and assume it passes, I'm going to instantiate CTK so it can make our base app. Then we're going to set the appearance to dark mode. Next, we're going to give it a title of QR code generator because, hey, I'm unimaginative like that. Then we're going to set the size of the window, and then we're going to set the window to not be resizable. Then we're just going to set what the app icon is, and that'll basically take care of the base app. Once we've got that done, we're going to make a sidebar. Now the sidebar is basically where the individual elements like a slider, text box, and color pickers will be. I'm just going to delete that line because that's not needed anymore. So everything will sit within that sidebar with the exception of the QR code image that we end up generating. This is pretty much going to be very much the same once we get past the text entry field. So the first thing we're going to do is just say text entry, and then that's just going to call our text elements function. And we're just going to say sit it within the sidebar. That'll then return a dictionary with each of the elements in. So that should be what I think it was a title, a label, and a text box. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to use a simple for loop to basically build those elements out. So what that'll give us is the title, the label, and the text field. After that, we're going to build our QR code version slider. And again, very similar to what we just did before. It's just going to call the create slider function and basically just take all of those arguments and come back with an elements dictionary, which again, we're just going to use another for loop to go and process that through. Then we're going to do another one for the QR code box slider. Again, another for loop, and then one for the border size. Again, another for loop. You can see it's pretty much repeatable, so I kind of made it a little bit easier to work with. And then we're going on to our color pickers. So we've got the foreground color picker, and then we've got a background color picker. Again, pretty straightforward. And now the last parts are the 2 buttons at the bottom, so the preview and the save button. I've had to put the functions for each of these in here because the way that tkinter historically works is if you put a function within the actual button and you execute the function, it basically runs the function when the app loads, and that's not ideal. So I've had to create a separate function for it, which is fine. And within the button, I've just got a command of update QR code. So it's basically just going to call this function. There are other issues with it. So like when I do a preview, for example, if I'd use another function, it doesn't really update the image properly. So I had to put the actual updating of the image actually within the main.py file. Not ideal, but I had no choice in the end. There's probably another way around it, and I guess if you do know a way around it, just leave a comment down below and I'll have a look at it. And then we're just aligning it on the grid. So this is basically just telling it where we want it on the actual bottom left. So we're saying sticky west, which basically just means align it to the left of that row. Again, we're doing a similar thing for the save button. So we've got a separate function. So we've got save image, and then we've got the actual button, which we'll then call save image. And then we've got sticky E, so east. So we're aligning this button to the right. And then the last part we've got is making the actual space for the actual QR code to be shown, or the preview image to be shown. So we'll start with preview image, and then as we update, preview image will be changed to whatever the QR code is when the preview button's pressed. And then we're just telling it where to go on the grid. And then the last part, app.mainLoop, that just basically tells the app to keep running in perpetuity until we close it. And then finally, right at the bottom, the jolly old if underscore underscore name underscore underscore equals main, run the main function. So that's all the code for the app. So if we try and run it, success. So let's just play around with the sliders a little bit. Okay. Yep, that seems to be working fine. Let's try the color picker. Yep. And let's just make it black for the background. Okay, that's fine. Turquoise-ish. Yep, that's fine. Okay, let's make this useful. So let's go with box size of about 8. Check it. Yep, let's put some text in. Perfect. And lastly, let's, you know what, let's just make that a different color for, no, background's fine. I want to change the foreground. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, let's try saving it. Save it to desktop. And there we go. We've got ourselves a little application that'll create a QR code with options to change the color, the size, and whatever text you want. And again, if you want a copy of the source code, there's a link in the description to GitHub for it. There's also other apps in there as well that I've done on YouTube. So if you want to take those as well, you're welcome to them. But yeah, that wraps up this video on creating a QR code generator with customTKinter and tkinter. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.